This is Miami Dolphins instant game reaction from Game 1 of the 2022 NFL season. Miami Dolphins would come away with a 20-7 victory over the visiting New England Patriots in what was a sweltering game in Miami Gardens. Tua Tagovailoa would go for 270 yards passing, going 23 out of 33, and finishing the day with one touchdown pass and a 104.4 passer rating. He would average 8.2 yards per pass, but would get sacked 3 times for 28 yards. And that would be part of the offense's struggle this day was injuries to the offensive line. We had in different times, Austin Jackson would go down with an ankle injury. We had shifts being made even to the replacement of Austin Jackson. Greg Little would come in and he would get injured later on. And then later in the game, we'd have newcomer, big-time free agent acquisition, Teron Armstead, who would also go down later on. He would end up returning, but nonetheless, there was a lot of shuffling going on in the offensive line. And I think that was probably the main issue for our offense was when we needed the protection, it wasn't there. And there was also not much running room either. Nonetheless, I think it was a super positive showing because the couple plays that these guys did make, man, it was probably some of the most exciting football that I've seen from the Miami Dolphins team going back to the 2008 Wildcat year, which frankly started after going 0-2. They would end up pulling out the Wildcat and destroying the Patriots in that game, in that third game of that season. In the rushing game, as I mentioned, there was not much of any rushing, but somehow the Dolphins managed to get 65 yards off of 23 carries, but only 25 of those yards came from Chase Edmonds, and he had the most of all the runners that we had in this game. Nonetheless, both Chase Edmonds and Raheem Mostert came away with some great, gritty plays that kept some drives alive and that really kept the momentum going for this team. On the receiving side, newcomer Tyreek Hill would end up with 94 yards on 8 receptions on 12 targets. Mike McDaniel said he was going to try to get Tyreek Hill the ball. Well, let me tell you, they really did try to give Tyreek Hill the ball. Tyreek Hill would also go for 6 yards on a carry, on a rushing attempt, on top of the 8 receptions that he made. Jalen Waddle would waddle his way for a 42-yard touchdown on a 4th and 8 play with 30 seconds or so left in the first half. Mike McDaniel calls a play. Tua drops back and he finds a crossing Jalen Waddle in between 3 defenders. Jalen Waddle will make that catch and run up the 2 defenders right in between them and literally would waddle his way into the end zone. I got to say, I was watching that part of the game with my 2.5-year-old son, and I was going berserk. And I will say, my son was like, at some point, he's like, "Dad, what's going on? Are you okay?" And then he was seeing what I was seeing, and he's like, "All right, touchdown." Overall, it was a great game to watch. This game had a little bit of everything. This game had great offensive plays. It also had incredible defensive plays. Let's talk about Brandon Jones and his 11 total tackles, 6 going for solo tackles, along with a sack that would give Melvin Ingram his first touchdown as a Miami Dolphins player. Who'd have thought that Melvin Ingram would have the first touchdown of the 2022 NFL season for your Miami Dolphins? A couple other stalwart performances were that of Javon Holland, who came away with a pick and returning that pick for 31 yards, which would set up the Dolphins on a offensive drive that pretty much set the tone for this game. Besides that, we also had undrafted free agent Kader Kohou, who in my mind, has cemented his way to being either a solid number 3 option on the defensive back, but at the very least, a 4th option for when we get back Byron Jones. Kader Kohou also had an incredible hit later on in the 4th quarter, which would pretty much ice this one and give the Dolphins their first victory of the 2022 season. On the special team side, we had Jason Sanders go 2 for 2 with a long of 49 yards and also going 2 for 2 from extra point land. We also had our punter, Thomas Morstead, who would end up punting 4 times total, going for 183 yards total, averaging 45.8 yards per punt with a long of 58 yards. On that 58-yarder, we had some great punt coverage by newcomer Justin Bethel, who pretty much was responsible, besides the boomer of a punt by Morstead. That coverage was essentially responsible for pinning down the Patriots at their own 5-yard line. The one thing to also note is that 3 of those punts ended up inside the 20-yard line. Against a Belichick-led team, field position can mean the difference between a win and a loss, and there was definitely proof of that in this game. On the Patriots side of things, Mac Jones would go for 213 yards, going 21 out of 30, throwing a touchdown pass while also throwing an interception. He would end the day with a 7.1 yards per pass average and finishing up the game with a 87.2 passer rating. He was sacked twice, and those 2 sacks would cost them 20 yards. But overall, Mac Jones looked pretty good. I can see why there's hype around him. Despite having a really rough time with Miami and their blitzing, he came away with a couple of really nice throws that I think will cement him as their quarterback long-term as well. On the rushing side, the Patriots really couldn't do much more than the Dolphins did, although I will say they did achieve more yards. They would go for 78 yards on 22 attempts. Damian Harris would get 48 of those yards, while Ramondre Stevenson would get 25 of them. On the receiving end, Jacoby Myers would lead the way with 55 yards off of 4 receptions, with a long of 27 off of 6 targets. Kendrick Bourne would have the longest play of the Patriots of the day, getting 1 reception and taking that reception 41 yards in between 2 Miami Dolphins defenders. The one thing, though, that I will say is the Patriots coughed the ball up twice. And in those, they coughed up the ball twice on fumbles and once on the interception. And I will say that would be essentially the difference between a win and a loss in this game. Nelson Aguilar, who got absolutely lit up by newcomer rookie free agent Kader Kohou, and then also Mac Jones, who when he got sacked by Brandon Jones, loses the fumble, to which Melvin Ingram would take to the house. Defensive side, this did not look like a typical New England Patriots defense, although I will say there was a couple of good plays by players such as Matt Judon, who would end up with 4 quarterback hits, a sack, tackle for loss. And then overall, their defense just played pretty much average. Long story short, I'm extremely excited for this game and extremely excited for the prospects of what this season looks for the Miami Dolphins. Looking forward to the next game against the Baltimore Ravens. And overall, I'm just extremely excited. I hope you are too. Later on, we're going to have some inside scoop from Elias Cruz, our boy Elias, who was at the game and caught a video of that 42-yard waddling scamper by Jalen Waddle. We'll see you guys next time for the Miami Dolphins instant game reaction of our 2022 NFL season.